This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit podcast. I'm Kay Savitz. Eric Podietz was co-founder of Interactive Picture Systems, a company that created software for 8-bit computers from 1982 through 1984. The company's first program was Paint for the Atari 8-bits, which was developed at the Superboots Software Development Lab located at the Capitol Children's Museum in Washington, D.C. Paint was first published by Reston, then by Atari. Their next program was Movie Maker, an animation program. Next came three educational titles published by Spinnaker Software: Trains, a business simulation; Grandma's House, a digital dollhouse; and Aerobics, a fitness program. The company also created Operation Frog, simulated frog dissection software for the Apple II and Commodore 64. This interview took place on September 9th, 2021. In it, we discuss Guy Nouri, and Lewin-Benham, and Bill Bowman, all of whom I have previously interviewed. After the interview, Eric sent me the 6502 source code for his early Apple II program Painter Power, which I have scanned and uploaded to Internet Archive.
I was fortunate in going to a private school that had a time-sharing terminal, ASR 33 teletype, hooked up to a time-sharing service, and I was lucky enough to have a physics teacher, Sam Tatnell, who let us use the computer for all kinds of projects. And so I kind of got the bug. And then I went to, I guess, summer of 9th, 10th grade, I went to a summer institute at the Morse School of Electrical Engineering at University of Pennsylvania, where ENIAC was invented. And they had I guess you call it a mini computer, a 12-bit computer, DEC PDP-8, and a couple other guys just went crazy with that. And I guess the next summer I had a job there for $1.65 an hour programming. I guess it was IBM 360 assembly language on a beast of a computer called an RCA Spectre 70, which RCA had given the university to debug, and the thing would just crash and grind to a halt every half an hour. But anyhow, we got these to PDP-8, and they had a graphics component. This was like around $100,000 worth of computer, a couple refrigerator-sized cabinets, and there were guys there doing a lot of really interesting work in computer graphics. Which I laugh now. There was one guy trying to make a horse, like a four-legged creature, walk. And when you see the Boston Dynamics demonstrations now, and I remember that that thing tottering across the screen, it would go for about 3 seconds, and then it would just fall all apart. And anyhow, it was a very stimulating environment. But I don't know if I go through my whole history, but in college, I kind of didn't want to do computers anymore. It was all I had was, there was not that much exciting going on. But I think that's why I studied geology, but when I graduated, I really decided to stick to computers, just because the great thing about computers is you have an idea, you write a program, it works or it doesn't work. In geology, you got to, if you want to prove continental drift, you got to get somebody to dig a 5-mile hole and, spend years and years. And I didn't have the patience for that. So that's why I ended up with a career in computers. I guess I started, out of college. I mean, I had summer jobs and stuff, but I ended up doing accounting programs, which was very interesting because this is the day and age of mini computers, PDP-11s, that kind of stuff. And mid-sized companies were getting off of card punch systems, and they were saying, "Hey, maybe we'll get a computer and automate our operations." And you just go. We was a consulting company. I would just go in there, work on site for a year or so, and learn everything there was to know about this company. And and then write accounting systems for it. So it was a real good encounter with real people doing real things, and what user interface works for them, and that kind of stuff. I spent about 3 or 4 years doing that, but I really wanted to get it to kind of merge what I was doing, what I'd been doing, and I had a sort of a hobby of watercolor painting. I kind of wanted to get into doing computer graphics. So I had a good bonus, and I bought this was now, I guess, late 70s. So around time the 8080 and Z80 came out, and you could buy for $3,000 or $4,000. You could buy a computer which you put together with S100 boards, and so that's what I did. I had a little thing at home and was programmed up my first graphics program, which my roommate pronounced when he saw what was happening on the screen. So that's channel 50 million. Then I guess now it was around 1980, and I think I was reading creative computing, and I heard that there was this festival, a computer art festival in Philadelphia. At the time I was living in Boston, and I just couldn't believe my ears. Like, a computer art festival? Like, what the what the hell is this? And so I wrote them a letter, and I sent some of the pictures, artwork I had done, and apparently the letter got lost in the mail. And I never heard back from them. So I thought, oh well, they're just not interested. I guess I'm just too late into this. But the arts festival was held in conjunction with a personal computer show. It was one of the first computer shows in the States, really. And so I decided I would take my thing and show it off there and see what people thought. And then I arrived, and I realized they were having the art show, and so I was invited in to because what I had was sort of a live animated painting system. And so I gave a little with music and did some live graphics, and I moved back to Philadelphia, which was where I had been born and raised. I guess I neglected to mention that as a kid, friends in my synagogue were some notable computer folks. Namely, we used to play football. We never talked about computers, but Dan Bricklin, inventor of VisiCalc, and a couple other guys. It was sort of in the air. In any case, so I moved back to Philadelphia, and then I decided to release a Apple II version of Channel 50 Million, which subsequently became Painter Power. And it was one of the first programs that was marketed by Microlab. And it wasn't much of a commercial success, but it got some attention, and people, there were some articles sort of written about it, I guess, and creative computing, and it was a little too weird for people.
Why was it too weird?
Well, they wanted a paint program, like, okay, put a dollop of paint on the screen, and like, let's make a tree and the dog and stuff. I get you. I don't know. And I was really into this whole idea of, like, I was just reading an interview I'd given, and was coupling the speed of the computer with the facility of the human mind. So in watercolor painting, you have to work very quickly because the paint's drying, and you have to be very spontaneous. So I wanted to have that kind of spontaneity with the computer. So that's what I was trying for. But Microlab didn't quite get it, but whatever.
They didn't like your name. They made you rename it, I guess, to Painter Power.
Right. But anyhow, I continued. I did a couple of, it was basically video accompaniment to computer music or whatever. And so I, did a few concerts and with Channel 50 Million. And then I think I had to get a job and make some money after that. I wasn't living off a royalty, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I was in the New York area just looking for people to talk to, and that's when I ran into Guy Nouri, and that was just about the time that he had started a relationship with this Capital Children's Museum, and so we teamed up and went down there. I guess that was 1981, and started Superboots Software. And we had a couple other programmers, Jimmy Snyder and Mark. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm forgetting Mark's last name, but Mark Scott. So we worked on creating this paint program that was published by Atari and Reston Software, and did some of the museum exhibits. But it was a totally crazy place to work. It's like the actual location is a former convent, and the museum was in half of it, and then the dormitory where the nuns lived was where we worked, and it was kind of like a hospital setting, like pink tile, and and the director lived in the museum, and so we just worked. We'd have meetings at midnight. We're working on cardboard boxes, and it was crazy. Plus, we weren't getting paid all the time. So there was a lot of frustration, a lot of pressure. There were a lot of high rollers who had funded. The director was very adept at getting people to donate equipment and money to the museum. She'd say to one computer manufacturer, look, we're, the capital of the nation, and people are coming, and all they see here is Atari. I mean, Dak, you're going to give us a mini computer, right? And so anyhow, she got a lot of people to do a lot of things for no money, but we finally couldn't take it anymore. So we left.
And before we move on there, I would like to know, I still after you're talking to Guy and after talking to Anne at the museum, I'm right. Still just don't feel clear how this museum ended up with a set of computer programmers and that were working kind of on staff. And
well, she got Atari to donate a bunch of Atari computers, so they had a computer lab and a computer classroom, and so kids would come in from inner city schools and do stuff on the computers. We weren't really, at least I personally wasn't really involved in the classroom activities or any of the software that was there. She had this vision of becoming a publisher of software and having that be an income stream for the museum. And so that's why she hired Guy, who was a terrific marketer and, amazingly charismatic guy, and, to be the leader of the Superboots software. And the only thing that was missing was money, which somehow she managed to, throw a few pennies at us. And then when we were going to get paid, she said, "Oh, but it's for the children. It's for the children." So, anyhow, it became clear after, a few months that, we were being taken advantage of for sure.
Okay. So you were tasked with making this paint program,
right?
Which was first published by Reston, and then I guess got noticed by Atari, so it became like an official Atari product.
Right.
Can you tell me about that process?
Well, it was really fun. Because Guy, who was an artist and had his artistic sensibilities, there was that influence. And then Alex, whose name I can't remember, but he wrote the book Paint. He was a writer. And he was, I don't know if you've seen a copy of the book, but it's sort of meant to trace the history of art in a very skeleton kind of way, but all the way through. Now you can paint with computers, and here's this product. That was kind of the idea. So there was Alex's take on things, and then we were trying to make something that really worked well for everybody, not just our own ideas about stuff, and make a really sweet program. I'm not sure. I think we did a pretty good job. Of course, we were limited by the fact that we were working with a very simplistic joystick, which was really not even analog. It was just digital. It was like left, right, up, down. And, so there was no, up a lot or over a lot or anything like that. Finally, I think in the end, we left. We had just a very limited time to finish the program, and I was up a zillion hours in a row. But anyhow, finally got done.
Nice. Before we move on, I understand that you also made some of the software for the museum itself.
Yeah, not so much. Maybe a little bit. There was another programmer, Kent Moulter, who lived in Texas, of all things. I have no idea how he made the connection with the museum, but he was writing a lot of the software for the museum. And there was, I don't know, there was like a weather program, and there was some interactive exhibits, like Morse code, and there was a primitive voice synthesis. You could text to speech thing, and it's a pretty simple program that gave you an idea of what a computer could do.
And ended your affiliation with the museum, and then started interactive picture systems with you and Guy.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Well, the idea was that we were going to make a program for animation like we had made a program for paint. So this was the genesis of Movie Maker. And we had a lot of interest from Reston Software, which is a division of Prentice Hall, or was at least. And so they said, yeah, we want to do this project with you. But the legal part of it was rather elusive, meaning no matter what we did, we couldn't get a contract. So they said we wanted it. We love this. We love this. We love this. We're working our butts off. We're sending them demonstrations. But meanwhile, no money, no contract. Very frustrating. So, but finally, we did get a contract that was just a disaster. But in any case, then we rehired Jimmy Snyder and Mark Scott and went to work on Movie Maker. And I think probably worked, probably about a year on that. Something, everything sort of blends into everything else. But they released that Reston Software, I guess, 83 or so, something like that, or 82 maybe. But in the meanwhile, the home computer was really on the upswing, and there was a lot of interest out there. And we were sort of getting ready to go into the next chapter of things when we got our affiliation with Spinnaker Software. So we were, again, running out of money, living off of credit cards. I don't think I had been paid in years. Some conference, I had got a contact called Spinnaker Software. So he took a trip to Boston, and he, on a lark, it wasn't his primary mission there, but he went over to see Spinnaker, and they, saw Movie Maker, and they were desperate to get product, because they had, some venture money, but there weren't people writing anything that was in their minds, what they were after. So I think on that visit, the guy plunked down $5,000 and said, don't talk to anybody else. We want you. And, within a month, they were like wiring money into our bank account, and we had signed up to do 3 or 4 products for them. So that was pretty exciting, nice. I have to say. And
did you meet with Bill Bowman, who was the CEO at the time?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I could picture her face, but I don't know if that was his name or the name of somebody else. But anyhow, I believe it was Bill.
All right. So you start making software for Spinnaker. Let's talk about those titles.
Yeah, the first set of titles that we were working on was Trains and Aerobics and
Grandma's House.
Grandma's House, thank you. And we had decided to make a kind of tool set that we could use, because we wanted to incorporate animation and music into all of these products.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of had like a little R&D branch of IPS, and had one particularly brilliant person named John Wolf. I like to say these people's names because they deserve a lot of credit. To make programs for the Atari, especially in assembly language, there really weren't a lot of good tools out there. I mean, to try to assemble a program on an Atari 800, which is what we were doing at the museum. I mean, you try to produce a listing, try like that paper, and I remember having to like babysit the printer because the printer would jam, and it's just a nightmare. So anyhow, I had my Krememco Z80 system, which then had a variant of Unix on it, and so we were all working off this sort of Unix-like system, and but we were starting to write some pretty sizable programs to cram into the Atari memory. And I said, John, what about can't we have a C compiler for the 6502? That would just give us so much more power, because we're like writing these reams and reams of assembly code. And John, who I can only describe John as, he was a master of the TRS-80, and he could just watch like lines of assembly code, of hex just going by on the screen, and just about read programs right out of the hex. I mean, the guy was amazing. Anyhow, he wrote us a C compiler for the 6502 in about 3 weeks. And I got a little bit ahead of myself because we didn't actually start using that until later. But back on the music and animation stuff, so I mentioned Bill Mauchley before, who's a pretty handy programmer, but also pretty good with music. He used to work. He was working with, well, anyhow. So we had Bill create a music development language, which the idea was we could write music in sort of musical notation almost, like D4, C3. And so we could take a musician, tell him, write this song, put it into MuseDev, and then the way we wrote the underlying code, it would work on the Commodore 64, and it would also work on the Atari 800. And with a little bit of tweaking, it could work on the Apple II, which, as you know, has no music generation capability. So it was pretty weak for the Apple. But and then we also had a whole way of managing animation. So we had an animator named Bob Svihovic, who lived in New Jersey, and he was creating animations, which we could then send over by modem and incorporate into programs. So in Grandma's house, there were little animations. So Bob would break these little snippets of animation, and then we could import them and use them in the program.
And I understand you were kind of using a custom version of Movie Maker to do some of these animations.
Right,
Is that
right. Yeah, we called it Movie Maker Professional, which was kind of, whatever. Guy was working with the Screen Cartoonists Union in New York as well. So, there was some interest there. Yeah, so the 3 programs, Trains, Grandma House, and Aerobics, Spinnaker actually published those. Aerobics was interesting to just mention it because we had, basically trying to compete with videotape, because people had Jane Fonda videotapes. And the nice thing about the whole idea of the Aerobics program was that you could tailor and choose whatever you wanted to work on. You didn't have to, if you wanted to work on your hips or your butt or your whatever the heck it was, you could choose what kind of routine you wanted. And so we had to create snippets of animation that would work for all this stuff. And, all had to work on this dinky little disc in 48K of memory.
How did they sell? Did anybody buy that Aerobics program?
Well, that was 1984, which is when, and Kmart was telling Spinnaker we want 15 SKUs, however many it was. And then, Spinnaker would turn around and say, look, we need to fill up the shelves at Kmart. We need 15 SKUs. How many can you give us? And so we would, dream up some programs and say, okay, we'll make this and program and that program and this program. And they said, great. And so basically we were looking ahead about a year and a half, which is how long it took us to make a product, or a year, something like that. And so, but right around 1984, 1985 is when Kmart called Spinnaker, I don't know if it was Kmart or whoever, but said, well, instead of 15 SKUs, the demand's slowing a little bit. Let's make it 7 SKUs. And you, Spinnaker, we asked for 7, just give us 3. So, of course, the telephone rings and Spinnaker says, well, those projects we talked about, we're not going to do them. Put them on hold. And at that point, we were working on a trilogy called Robots, and we were working with Michael Crichton on that. And we were also working on something called Instant Cartoons. And then we also had a choreography program called Dance. And I can't remember if there was anything. Oh, yeah, there was a little educational program called, a little character called Sprite. There was like a math and an English version of that, where kids were going to drive this little character around the screen and solve math problems. And he was going to do a little dance and that kind of stuff. Anyhow, pretty much all that. We did work on it quite a bit. The dance program, we actually created it, but it just never got marketed. The Robots program sort of got to be like an alpha. We had created some 3-dimensional backgrounds, which were really cool, and then we're now using the C compiler so we could write some more high level type of constructs in the game. I was really looking forward to that because we were just trying to get the little 6502 to do unimaginable things.
Is there, and so that stuff was just shelved and
the dance program, a choreographer did use it quite a bit. And a local choreographer used to use it together with, you project images from the dance program and have these dancers jumping around, and then he had real dancers sort of interacting with it. But that was about the size of it. Never really went anywhere.
Do you think there's any chance that any of that software still exists somewhere?
Probably in some landfills.
Okay, cool. I'll get right on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any of it.
That's too bad.
There are some, there may be some other people you want to talk to. The fellow who wrote most of the dance program, his name is Ken Appleman. He'd be a very interesting person to speak with.
I saw a quote from you guys at one point saying
I'm sorry, I wanted to mention one other person.
Yeah.
Because I forgot about Operation Frog.
Which was Apple II and I think Commodore 64 only, published by Scholastic. Virtual dissection software. Right.
And
where'd that come from?
That was pretty innovative. I guess he had gone to talk to Scholastic, and they wanted stuff that could be used in schools a little bit more. And so we actually wrote 2 programs for them. One was actually a text-based program, an outline processor called First Draft. But then a programmer named Chip K was responsible for Operation Frog. I don't know who came up with the idea. Basically, we were consulting with a biologist, and we figured out, when you dissect a frog, what the process is and sort of, what's revealed. And you take this frog apart, piece by piece, and, you can click on an organ and find out more about it. And I guess, there's probably more to it. I'm just kind of forgetting the details of it. But I know that there was a court case in California where some 8th grade girl didn't want to dissect a frog, and the judge said, well, you can use this software. And so they ruled against the school and made them use Operation Frog.
Neat. You saved a frog, perhaps.
Yeah, you said an article was written. You read an article somewhere, something or other.
Oh, I said an article that said you planned to create 10 programs a year, and that didn't happen. But it sounds like maybe that quote happened before Spinnaker was just like, no, we're dialing it back.
1984 was like the sort of the height of things. I remember going to CES in Chicago. The whole company took a train out there, and we all had our T-shirts, and we were walking through the aisles, and people were running up to us and asking all kinds of questions. Very heady stuff. And then the bottom dropped out pretty much.
In some of the articles, and maybe this was just something that you cultivated, but there was a little bit of a rock star vibe in some of the articles and quotes, and kind of the way the company was presented.
Right. Well, we had a great publicist, Emily Whelan, and then, as I mentioned before, Guy is just he can be in a room full of people, and if he stands up and starts talking, the room just goes quiet, and just kind of magical. So he just had a way of protecting himself and protecting the company that did well for us. I mean, it's not really my thing, but anyhow.
So what happened next?
Well, we sort of tried to run on vapors for a while. We didn't really want to lay anybody off. We had almost 20 people, 15 people, but after 3 or 4 months of running on vapors, we just had to start lay off people. And then, so I then moved to New York because, he had been living in New York, doing all the business stuff. And so I moved up to New York, and we shrunk down to like 4 or 5 people and decided to focus our expertise with animation in high-end graphics. So in television stations, weather graphics, that kind of stuff. And we also had another project going with, I don't know if you've heard of Trintex before. You've certainly heard of Prodigy.
I don't think I've heard of Trintex.
Okay, well, You've heard of Prodigy, though.
Sure, the online service, IBM Sears, that one, yeah.
The prior name was Trintex, and it was for, I guess it was CBS, Sears, and Columbia Records. I think 3 of them formed the 3 companies behind Trintex. Mm-hmm. But I think then one of them dropped out. I can't exactly remember. But Prodigy was wanting to introduce its service, and they wanted to do kind of what AOL had been doing, which was sending out discs to everybody under the sun. And so they needed to have a demo disc that you just stuck into a computer and off it would go. They didn't want to boot DOS. They didn't want anything. They wanted it to be a self-running, shove it in and off it goes. And so that and this was actually for the IBM PC. Yeah, I was getting mixed up. I said Apple II, but I meant PC. So this is around the time that the PC is getting popular, and also around the time that IBM was about to announce the PC Junior, which was its attempt to, compete with Apple. Yeah. They needed to have one single-sided floppy, an operating system and a total demonstration of the Prodigy service. So we ended up doing that for them. And because we kind of had a lot of expertise in cramming a lot of smarts into a very small disk. So we actually wrote a version of DOS that would boot, because Microsoft wasn't willing to license their operating system. They wanted $50 or $70 a disk or something like that. So we wrote a self-booting DOS with a fellow named Chris Rogers, who also deserves a lot of credit. He was one of the programmers who stayed on. He wrote that, and then the Prodigy service was based on the Naplip's protocol, which, are you familiar with that? Which is a way of sending a lot of graphics, compact graphics over a 300 baud modem. And so it's device independent protocol, but we had to build an Apocalypse decoder because the licensed one would have been this huge piece of code which wouldn't fit on the disk. So we wrote an Apocalypse decoder. And anyhow, that was another project that was going on and helping keep us going. And then on the animation side, we rewrote we wrote an animation program to work on something called the Color Graphics Art Star, which was Color Graphics is a company based out of Madison, which had a lot of the first weather computers. So in other words, a weather forecaster, could do wipes and little lightning bolts and that kind of stuff. And but we added animation to that. So if they wanted to animate the lightning bolt, instead of just have to sit there, they could use our software. So you may have heard of Al Roker, the weatherman, and
sure,
but he was one of the early promoters or users of that software. So this is like mid 80s, something like that, 87, somewhere in there, 86, something like that. And I think we also were working on, this is kind of dull, but did real estate channels on cable TV.
Sure.
So we had a package that we sold to cable TV stations. So if they wanted to have a real estate channel, you could digitize the house and rotate the thing and keep track of the ads and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to make a living.
And this was still under the Interactive Picture Systems umbrella?
Right. And then I think we started with a program called Video Fax, the idea being that he came up with that name. You're not really faxing the video, but a lot of companies, when they're shooting commercials, they'll shoot a commercial on location, or they'll just have, they won't shoot the commercial, they'll shoot they'll have a storyboard, the basics, and they'll want to send that back to Madison Avenue to get approvals. And, they need to, send it immediately. You can't wait for Federal Express or what have you. So video fax was a way of using what we expertise that we figured out in video compression to be able to send videos over phone lines. I guess it did achieve some commercial success, but I think I had left the company by then because lots of stuff wasn't working out.
Mm-hmm. So you left the company and it kept going for a while and you went on to your next adventure?
Yeah, went on to my next adventure.
And what do you do today?
Well, now I am the chief cook and bottle washer for Emma1sock.com, which is my wife's business, which we started about 20 years ago. Used to, before it's in its second iteration, the last 20 years, we sell fabric to home sewers. And in the late 90s, Emma1sock had been a children's clothing line. And so for about 4 or 5 years, we were, I wasn't involved so much in programming then. But in the year 2000, we stopped making the children's clothing and just decided to sell the fabric. And selling fabric online was pretty new back then. But I programmed up the website and, it started to become pretty popular. And fortunately, my wife is very talented at picking fabric and describing it and photographing it. So I did all the back end stuff, and it's managed to support us, for the last umpty years. I guess I left out about 10 years from 1990 to 2000, which I could llaborate if you want. But
sure, you're welcome to. Emma, say the name of the website again.
Emma Onesock, ONESOCK.com.
Great, thank you. Sure, fill me in on the missing decade.
Yeah, so I guess I moved back to Philadelphia and went to work creating software for taxi cab companies, which is it's really cool. I know it might sound kind of dumb, but taxi cabs are so technology. I mean, everything that's happening with the driver getting into the cab, the driver driving the cab, the driver putting gas in the car, picking up people, dropping off people, paying his lease. There's just an incredible amount of stuff that needs to be transactions that need to be tracked. And so I worked with a small company and to produce a software for the PC that, ran a taxi cab company. And the fun thing about it is that every taxi company in creation, they're all different. They all have special little rules and special ways of doing things. And so you had this one package which you had to continually customize for every little taxi company. So I was doing a lot of traveling and I worked with the owners and find out what little nuances they needed and hang out at taxi cab companies, which are, if you want to get to know a community, that's a great way of doing it because the drivers really are, they go everywhere in the city. They know everything. They know what's happening. And they're an interesting bunch who know how to hustle.
I bet. I can imagine.
So I did that for about 5 years. And then one of our customers was a very large taxi company in Washington. And the head of that, it was three brothers. One of the brothers, Dave Schaefer, said he was starting a telecommunications company. And would I come on board and, be his director of IT, what have you. And so, anyhow, that was probably late 90s. Dave Schaefer, people may not know, but they may know a company called Cogent, which is was what Pathan eventually grew and morphed into, or what Dave eventually became the head of Cogent. And they were one of the biggest internet providers, wholesale internet, in the United States. I mean, they have a huge amount of capacity. Fiber is running all over the world. And I think, I'm sure Amazon uses them and Netflix and God only knows what else. But so late 90s, I worked with Dave till I guess 1999, and came back to Philadelphia and then worked for Beyond Books, which was one of the first online publishers trying to replace textbooks in schools. Mm-hmm. So they're only about 15 years ahead of their time. Yeah, so that was till about 2003 or 4. And then I started working with my wife.
Well, in the Atari Commodore days, was the company a success? You talked a lot about the struggle and how you weren't getting paid and this and that. But I mean, was it
once Spinnaker came on board? I mean, they were funneling money and they didn't want us to think about, starving. So they had a lot of money and were, giving us a monthly stipend basically. And so, we felt pretty successful then, although living off of advances is not exactly, that's pretty much what we were doing. We did attract some venture capital, and which was, that was also a good endorsement. But I wouldn't say we had a great, huge commercial success. It was probably our biggest success was our PR was, fantastic. I mean, you name the magazine, we were in it. So I guess I got my 15 minutes of fame. Where Guy got his 15 minutes, I got like 2.5 maybe.
He did tend to get quoted more often than you, but you were in some pictures and things. So
right. trying to think of some other people that were really great contributors. I think I mentioned. I didn't want to give anybody short shrift, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there's something about the culture those days and about what people thought about computers and the computer games versus what we were doing, which was more edutainment kind of stuff, because we resisted doing any shoot 'em up stuff. I mean, there was at one point we got involved with serious software, which and we were going to just try to convert some games over to other machines just to kind of have some projects to bring some money in. But we didn't really choose to do that, shoot 'em up stuff. I think I guess another thing about Movie Maker in retrospect was, the press loved it because, you could do animation on your home computer. But it turns out doing animation is really hard, to sit and actually create animation. So while it was kind of a really, really cool idea, cool piece of technology, and I think, a select few people who were willing to put the time in really got off on it. It wasn't going to be a mega hit. I guess another interesting thing was this choreography program. I thought, geez, who's going to use this? I mean, and I actually even said it in front of, what was the guy's name from Spinnaker?
Bill Bowman.
Yeah. I don't think it was Bill. I think it was the head of marketing. But anyhow, I said, Dave something. Anyhow. I said, do you really think like little girls are going to be animating? Like this is going to be the kids who play with, instead of Barbies, they're going to be making dancers go around on the screen. And he was totally confident that this was, they're going to put a lot of money behind this thing, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, I didn't say any more. It was a really cool project, but it was interesting to hear him say that.
If you could send a message to the people who are still playing with their Atari computers today, and you can right now, what would you tell them?
I would really want to ask them, what are you doing and why are you doing this? I mean, I understand that, even programming any computer, it could be fascinating. I guess it's cool to keep it going, but I really don't understand when things are you can do so much more with tools that are out today.
Sure. Well,
I mean, it's understanding, what's inside the computer, and that's cool, but I'm not sure what motivates people to do that. And I'm speaking to one who's in love with it, so I don't want to insult you or anything. I don't understand it exactly.
Oh. I think that the short answer is they were fun then, and they're still fun. And in a world of very, very complex computers,
right.
it's possible on the Atari and the Commodore to understand everything that's happening.
Right.
On every level.
And
there's not layers and layers of abstraction and
right. So, definitely. The Vintage Computer Society.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Have you been to their shows?
I haven't. I'm just sort of peripherally aware of of them, and so I'm still kind of in touch with Bill Mauchly and some of the other people who are who had some real vintage computers. What's the other? I'm curious how you guys keep your equipment going. So all those clunky Atari disk drives, and God forbid a Commodore disk drive.
Right. Well, the disk drives are a little hard to keep going, but many of us aren't using disk drives anymore. There's new equipment where you can feed an SD card into the Atari. It thinks it's a disk drive. It thinks it's the world's biggest disk drive, and
right.
So we're not stuck using floppies anymore. But the actual computer's pretty bulletproof.
Yeah,
they're still running just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I really, of all the, between the Apple, the Commodore, and the Atari, the Atari was definitely my favorite. Just because it was solid. I mean, the Commodore was just a POS. I mean, we would buy, when we wanted to buy one for our development lab, we would buy 3 and figure out, because a lot of the chips were inconsistent. And so you couldn't really utilize the full capability, especially the SID chip, the sound chip. So you had to figure out what's the lowest common denominator and just write the code for that. So yay for Atari.
Yay for Atari. That's my motto. Yay for Atari. Well, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it.